I wanted to start this podcast because I kept meeting so many people with really inspiring stories, and you are just a prime example of that.
For me, it was very much like my face isn't perfect, so everything else has to be.
Okay.
And if it's not, we have an issue.
Mhm.
So that kind of was my way of coping, which was really unhealthy and really bad. It was practically most every other or every few weeks I was having surgery. And my mom eventually was like, I just can't work and do this. So she had to give up work. Something a lot of people forget is that healing, or whatever word you want to use, is it's not linear at all. It's very up and down, and you're gonna have days where you feel like absolute shit, and you're just, I'm not getting out of bed. Like, there are days where I'm just like, no, I don't want to do this. But there are other days where I'm like, let's do this. I'm excited. I think that we forget that it's not linear, and that's okay. I started my Instagram for me in a way, and I didn't expect it to help anyone else. I was like, well, I'm just going to rant to, my 5 followers and stuff like that. And then suddenly I got messages being like, oh, thanks so much for your help. And I saw people like Nikki Lily and Katie Piper, all of these people doing it. And I was like, if they can do it, why can't I?
Welcome to the Life with a Difference podcast, a platform to amplify the voices of those living with a visible difference, and also to provide relevant information from industry leaders and experts.
Hey.
Oh, I can hear you. Got you. Hallelujah. Sorry about that. I feel like I start every podcast explaining my latest technical issue. And so then this is me and Abigail's second attempt because we just couldn't get the sound to work. So I'm so sorry about that.
It happens. I think most people have these issues. It's very common.
Thank you. Thank you for being so understanding. Thank you for booking back in as well. I really appreciate it. How are you doing? You all good?
I'm doing really well, thank you. How have you been?
Yeah, not too bad. Thank you. Yeah, not too bad. Yeah, I'm all good at the moment. I've been walking around your virtual gallery. That's a really cool. I don't know if I'm just really old, but I'd never seen that before. That's a really good way to display your work, isn't it?
Thank you. Yeah, I really love it. I was actually really funny because in sixth form, when I was applying to uni, you need a portfolio, of course, of when you go to creative subjects, and I just had all my stuff on my phone, in a folder, and they were like, no, you need an actual thing, and I was like, well, okay, I want to make this virtual gallery, and my teacher was like, you could just make a PowerPoint like everyone else. I was like, no, I want to go extra. And I basically made that gallery, and each year now I just keep going.
It's such a cool idea. It's such a good way to display it. For sure, it'd be really cool with a VR headset, I think. But yeah, do you mind starting by introducing yourself and explaining a little bit about your visible difference?
Of course. Hi, my name's Abigail. I have a facial difference from having a tumour when I was 6 years old. I got a tumour when I was 6, which is now removed. By the age of 7, it was removed. But after that, of course, because I was so young, we couldn't fully reconstruct, which meant that every year since then, I've needed surgery to keep my face and body working, which has resulted in a lot of facial scarring and scars everywhere else. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. I wanted to start this podcast because I kept meeting so many people with really inspiring stories, and you are just a prime example of that. I mean, your strength and your resilience. I mean, I'm sure we'll get into it, but you've had over 100 surgeries, and to be able to come out of the other side of that and still be smiling is really inspiring.
She kept being like to my mum, "Oh, her face is lopsided. It's really weird." But my sister at the time was quite vain in a way. She was very into makeup, very girly. So my mom was like, "Go away, stop being mean to Abby. It's fine. She's okay." And then my mum started realizing when I was sleeping, my breathing was quite labored and quite heavy, and it was quite an aggressive breathe, it was like a struggle. And she was like, "Oh well, I guess we can take her to the GP, probably just some antibiotics or something." And my GP saw me, and he was like, "Oh no, this is way more than antibiotics." And next thing I know, by the next week, I was having my first operation.
The next week? Oh wow! So you were 6 when you had your first operation?
Yeah, it was a very fast process.
Okay. Can you remember that? Can you remember? Do you have that memory?
I have bits and pieces because
Okay.
I was so young, but it was also quite a traumatic event. So I think that
Mhm.
I have got quite a lot of memories from when I was younger.
Mhm.
But because again, I was so young, I don't actually remember what age was each. So a lot of the time I'll be like, when I was 6, and my mom's like, no, you're 8. And I was like, oh, okay. No.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. With the tumor, this is kind of a bit of ignorance from me. With a tumor, is it always related to a health condition, or can you just get a tumor on its own? Do you know?
You can't just get a tumor. Honestly,
Okay.
you just get one. They just
Hmm.
come.
Hmm.
They're very. I mean, I just got one out of nowhere. So yeah, you can just get one.
Okay. Okay, that's
Yeah.
interesting. And then you mentioned that you had to go through a crazy amount of surgeries, which you're still doing to this day.
Yeah.
One I think I saw was a 22-hour surgery, which is just crazy. So is that right?
So it was 17 and a half.
17 and a
Um,
half.
yeah, I was asleep for probably over 24 hours because
Okay.
when you have such big operations, they don't just wake you up immediately afterwards because
Hmm.
your body's needing rest and you're in a lot of pain, of course. So I was probably asleep like 22 to 24 hours or like around that mark. Um, but yeah, it was 17 and a half hours. It was my biggest one.
Mm.
And it was quite a big in-depth operation that none of us expected it to be that long. Like we were expecting it 12, 14 hours, but then suddenly like we were more thinking 12, 13, and suddenly it was 17 and a half. Yeah.
How did you find the healthcare generally? So far has it been fairly well? Do you feel quite well looked after, or do you think there's kind of room for improvements?
Um, I have been very well looked after. I think of course there's always room for improvement in life, but I think I have been really well looked after. But I think for everything in a way, like for any industry, there's always room for improvement. But personally, I've had quite a good experience. I mean, of course, I've had certain negative ones, but my majority has been quite positive.
That's good. That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, I think I'm kind of largely the same in that, yeah, as you said, there's always room for improvement, but we're quite lucky to be where we live, to live where we do, I guess, and to get the
Yeah,
care that we need. Yeah, we're quite lucky in that sense.
exactly.
Um, Going on to school, how did you find school generally? Was it a kind of, I found school quite difficult, and I think a lot of people in the visible difference community
Yeah.
do. Was that your experience also?
Yeah. It was quite a challenge. That's actually why we got in touch with Changing Faces because my I went into I was in primary school when this all started, and I suddenly get a visible difference that was very visible because it's right on my face, so you can really see it. And it was a lot worse back then. And my mum was like, I don't actually know what to do because this isn't in the, you know, parenting books. So my dermatologist at the time was like, oh, you should speak to this charity for Two Faces. They're really great. And my mom's like, amazing. So we got in touch and Changing Faces actually spoke to my teachers and the staff in my school because, which I actually am really grateful to this because they said that if they talk to the children and have like they talk to the children, everyone will know like, oh, it's Abigail, like of course it's Abby, like I'm the only one with the visible difference, so it has to be because we're trying to basically say be nice to me, and that just causes more problems. So Change of Faces spoke to my teachers and the adults essentially in the room to explain to them how to help me, and as well as me explained to me how I can deal with certain situations with when a kid basically says like, "What's on your face? Why do you look like that?" And like the common questions we all get.
For anyone listening, me and Abigail are both Changing Faces campaigners. Is
Yeah,
campaigners the right word, isn't it? Yeah, campaigners.
yeah,
Some places use ambassador, and some, yeah, we're both campaigners. And Changing Faces are doing amazing things. They're such an
mm-hmm.
incredible charity. It's such a privilege to be able to do work with them because they're really, really helping people like me and Abigail in the visible difference community. And are you going to the meetup on the 20th?
I am, yeah.
Oh
Will
yeah,
you be
perfect.
there?
Yeah, I'll be there. Yeah, it'll
Oh,
be really good to meet
yay.
everyone.
Definitely,
Yeah.
yeah.
Have you been practicing your poses? Apparently, we've got to practice our poses for the camera.
Oh, I need to do that. I haven't done that yet, but I mean, I kind of have because in uni sometimes we have to like stand behind the camera, so I kind of, if that makes sense.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think actually it's going to be quite a busy day. I think they've got quite a lot planned in terms of like little training courses and photography and stuff.
yeah.
So that'll be quite good.
I'm
Looking
quite
forward to it.
excited.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
it'll be good. Would you be comfortable sharing a specific example of a time that you have been treated quite poorly? And I think if, like so many people in the visible difference community, it's quite a big bank of things to pull on, unfortunately. But would you be happy to share one of those experiences?
I think one of my most recent ones was actually straight after my reconstruction, the 17.5 hour operation. I came home and I had actually, it's like ironic, but I had on my leg like a massive scar, like a proper from my knee to my ankle scar, and it had like an open wound in the middle, like that, like an
Mm.
oval type thing. And um, I was sitting on the couch, and two of my friends came to visit me, which was really, really sweet. And of course, it was bandaged, but the community nurse came to look at my scar and to, rewrap it and everything. And of course, my friend, we were very nice. We were like to my friends, like, oh, if you want, you can leave. You don't have to. And one of my friends was like, both my friends were like, oh, it's fine. I can, like, it's chill. My friend, one of them was like, oh my gosh, that's so big. And like, she went freaked out. She was like, that is so ugly. And she like full on freaked out and like went out of the room. And I mean, I understood where she was coming from because, of course, she's never seen something like this. But on the receiving end, it was quite hard because this is going to be on my body for the rest of my life now. And especially when you're post-op, the drugs you get given makes you quite emotional, to
Mhm,
say it
mhm,
nicely. So
mhm.
you get quite like any little thing becomes like a massive thing in your brain in a way. So I afterwards felt so like horrible, and I just felt like I felt like guilty on the one hand, and as well as guilt, I felt like ugly and horrible, even though I had worked on myself for my face. I'd never, and I think I'd worked only for my face, not for my other scars, because that was my first visible scar, not on my face.
Okay.
And that was quite a big moment for me because I was like, oh my gosh, it's not just my face now. Like I have to actually and I started freaking out. Like, what am I going to do in the summer? Like, I can't wear like a cutesy skirt anymore, and I'm going to have to figure out ways to cover this. Then I was like, no, you don't need to cover this. You don't cover your face. Like, and I had this massive like juxtaposition going on in my brain. So I was like, I don't know what to do now. And I also felt guilty that I put her in a position, but then I was like, no, that's just life. And I had such complex emotions. And whilst when the anesthetic that they give you when you have surgery, it makes you quite low sometimes. Like for me personally, I get quite low post surgery. Something like that's just what the drug does to me. So when these things happen, I of course dramatize it way more in my brain because of that. And like I knew that, of course. I was like, no, it's fine. You're okay. And then I was like, no, but I was, sporadic crying. Then I'm like, no, I'm being strong. And I was juxtapositioning and vacillating between every emotion.
Yeah, no,
But that was probably my most recent one.
that's a complex situation. That's an interesting perspective. It's quite different to kind of what everyone else talks about. They talk about that really horrible situation from that random person on the street or whatever. But as you say,
Yeah.
when it's from someone you know and someone you trust and a friend, that does make it that little bit more heartbreaking, I suppose, and that little bit more raw.
Yeah.
For sure, it must be really, really, really difficult to deal with, and that took a lot of I guess emotional intelligence of you to be able to work through that. And are you still friends with that person now?
They actually are in another country, but we do
Okay.
message from time to time. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Yeah, because yeah,
Yeah.
it must be. It's hard to see past those situations. I saw your stuff on Changing Faces about how you bejeweled your scar in the end
Yeah.
to kind of get a bit more confidence with it. That was really interesting. Would you mind talking
Yeah.
about that?
Of course. Oh my gosh, that's one of my favorite projects I've done. I basically, it's actually this. all goes to one of my other friends. One of my closest friends, she gets this like glitter eyeliner, and I was like, "Oh, that looks really cool." And then suddenly I was thinking about it, because sometimes when you go to shops, you like swatch on your hands, like the color, to see if it matches your skin tone. And I was like, if I put it on my hand, I could definitely put this on my scar. And I'd seen other creators with vitiligo do that thing where they like circle around their things. And I was like, what about if I do that with my scar? And then the next thing I know, I was sitting in my room with like two eyeliners just sitting there painting my scar. And I was like, this is so much fun. And I was like, okay, now I'm going to go on a walk with this. And then suddenly I was like, I love this so much. And then I messaged someone in Changing Faces. I was like, I have an idea. I was like, this is like me, because this creates my art with my like scars. This is basically me in a project, because
Mm-hmm.
I've got these scars and like the pain, I guess. But as well as that, I've got the art in me. So I got really excited to do this. And yeah, that's basically what happened.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's so good. The way to turn that into something positive, and I think a lot of us feel the need to sort of drop our heads and play down everything and not draw attention to ourselves, and that must be super liberating to
It
do
was
the complete opposite.
No, 100%. I mean, I had glitter absolutely everywhere for the next like week, but it was so much fun.
That's
Honestly,
awesome.
it was so much fun. Like, because
Mm.
again, this was my first visible scar not on my face. So I was like, I'm going to make this fun. Like, how can I make this that it's exciting for me? And then I was like, let's bejewel it. I'm bedazzling this.
That's
Yeah,
so
because
good.
this makes everything better.
Yeah, of course it does. Of course it does. Yeah, but my wife uses glitter quite a lot with what she does, and she comes out of our workshop
Really.
covered head to toe sometimes, but she's always got a big smile on her face. Going back to your education a little bit, do you think it overall sort of affected your education? Do you think it essentially made it more difficult to learn?
Yes and no. I think it made me a lot more reserved and a lot
Hmm.
more shy, in which kind of affected everything, not just my education. Um, but I would say yes, because I became so when my visible difference started and my health journey started, because they're quite intertwined. I became a selective mute, and when I started high school, especially, I was kind of like untraining those bad habits of just like talking to only like me and my family, basically, and close friends. And because of that, I was quite shy, and I kept being like, no, you can't do that. You're not like, I'd say a lot of the time, like, she's pretty, so she can do it, but I can't. Like, she can put her hand up in glass, she's pretty, it's fine. And I was like, that makes no sense. But in my brain, I kept being like, you know the answer, but you can't put your hand up. You're not pretty enough. You've got like a facial difference. Like, don't draw attention to yourself.
Hmm.
And because of that, a lot of the time, I would struggle because I wouldn't ask a question that I needed help with. Or, for instance, I remember once in primary school, I I had done the homework. I did it. It was all good. Everything was great. But when the teacher said, "Okay, guys, during the day, just come up to my desk and put it on there," I freaked out. I was like, "Nope, can't do that." And I was like, "I'm not doing that. That's too much." And then, of course, I left it in my desk. So like, I'm not going up to, I'm too, like, my, my self doubt and everything was like, I can't do that. So because of that, my grade was like, my teacher was like, well, she failed. And then it was things like that.
With the selective mutism, is it the case that you're choosing not to speak, or you just physically feel that you can't, like you're just kind of stopped from doing it, if that makes sense?
I think for me, it was both, because of course I could talk, like I physically could talk, like I could easily talk. I would chat my friends and family off if they let me. Like I was very chatty at times. But when it came to certain people, I just couldn't get the words out of my mouth. I just froze and was like, nope, I'm gonna go now
Mm.
instead. I was like, I can't do it. And it was kind of a control thing for me, because I think everyone has selective mutism for, like, everyone develops it for different reasons. For me, it was quite a control thing, because at the age of 6, everything in my life turned around and I physically had no control. And I realized gradually that if hypothetically I said, if, when a nurse was like, oh, can I just put a cannula in? And I just said no, they'll be like, lol, we're gonna anyway. But if you just ignore them, they'll persistently keep asking you, and they'll you have that little gap of time where you can stop the cannula going in for like
Mm-hmm.
a good few minutes. And I like that control, because again, I had no control as a child. And I think another thing was that I wasn't a teenager or an adult. So a lot of teenagers or adults, they'll go to usual substances, and they'll, you know, go drink, like go down to the pub and have a drink or something. I was literally 6. I couldn't do that. So for me, control was quite a big problem. And I decided that talking was a fun way to get myself control.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh, that's interesting. That's interesting. You're that's very, sort of self-aware to realise that that is what the kind of cause of it was. I kind of have that issue a little bit with control, and that my condition, it oscillates all the time. So, like, I'll wake up one day and I'll be great, and I'll wake up the next day and it'll be terrible. And I will,
yeah,
I'm doing everything that I possibly can, and I would do anything. If a doctor told me I needed to go and run 100 miles, I would go and do it.
yeah,
But unfortunately, it's just not the way it works. You can do everything right,
exactly.
and you wake up and it's terrible. And the way I try and
Yeah,
get control of that is I almost kind of victim blame myself a little bit, and I kind of say, oh well, that's
yeah.
because you had that chocolate bar yesterday. That's full of sugar.
Mm,
That's bad for you, and so that's 100% your fault. I think that I'm starting to realise that it's not always a good thing. I always wanted to believe that everything was in my hands and in my control, when
yeah,
ultimately it isn't.
it really
And you
isn't.
can, yeah, totally. And you can kind of
It's a
go down.
hard one, honestly.
Yeah, yeah. Because you don't want to be a victim. You don't want to be like a passenger and like you're just along for
Yeah,
the journey. You want to feel like you have some level of
100%.
control.
Yeah,
But at the same time, you can't get to the point where every bad thing that happens is completely my fault. And what was I thinking? And it's
yeah.
difficult.
Oh, completely get that. Been through that, and 100% understand that, because I think most people with any chronic illness or disability probably goes through that at some point in their lives.
Mm,
So I hear that.
yeah. At school, did you get concessions? Did you get help with the teachers especially after Changing Faces came in? Do you feel like,
Yeah,
you got the help that you needed?
I did. Yeah, I
Okay.
got quite a bit of help. For my visible difference and the lack of schooling I had, I got quite a bit of help actually, which was really good and really helpful.
Okay, excellent. Yeah. I was speaking to a few other guests and saying, it's been a little while since I was at school. You were a lot closer to school than I was. And it wasn't particularly good when I was at school. And a lot of people sort of my age
Oh,
and up say the same.
sorry.
And so we were saying it was quite interesting to hear from someone a bit younger to hear how they
Yeah,
found it. And a lot of people say that it definitely changes from school to school and each situation is different. It depends if that person's got enough people to advocate for them and speak up for
that's
them.
so true.
But yeah, it's lovely to hear that you got the help that you needed. That must have been a huge benefit.
Yeah, I think school and being ill in any way is quite a massive topic. I think I could probably write like 3 books on it, because there's so much you can say. And but overall, I think I had all right help, and I think I got quite a lot of help, which
Oh,
is
that's lovely to hear. That's really nice to hear.
yeah.
Yeah. Would you say overall that you're kind of in a good place at the moment in life? Would you say?
Yes, I would. I think I I've been working on my feeling good about my body since I was basically really young. Um, I was preteen, sitting there having the crisis of, do I look fat type conversation, which of course stemmed from having a facial difference. I found that if one thing, so for me, it was very much like my face isn't perfect, so everything else has to be.
Okay.
And if it's not, we have an issue.
Hmm.
So that kind of was my way of coping, which was really unhealthy and really bad because I put a lot of pressure on myself and my body to be a certain way, which it just wasn't. And I now, after years and years of trying to figure my life out and figure things out, have got to a place where I think majority of most of my weeks I'm a lot happier than when I was as a younger person. Um, I think that something a lot of people forget is that healing, or whatever word you want to use, is it's not linear at all. It's very up and down, and you're gonna have days where you feel like absolute shit, and you're just, I'm not getting out of bed. Like there are days where I'm just like, no, no, I don't want to do this.
Mm.
But there are other days where I'm like, let's do this. I'm excited. I think that we forget that it's not linear, and that's
Mm.
okay, because I thought that my face isn't perfect, and that's it. That's the problem. And I had to start to learn how some days, yeah, my face affects me. I mean, I have days where I still, as I'm like 20 at the moment, and there are still days where I'm just like, I want to, whatever a normal face is. Like, I don't want these struggles. Like, I want to, I don't want the struggle. I want it to be easy. But then there are other days where I'm like, I love it. It's fun. It's unique. It's exciting. And again, it's not a linear situation, but at the moment, I think I'm probably the best I have ever been.
That is so important for people to hear. That is excellent. I think that sometimes with advocacy, not organisations like Changing Faces, but sometimes it can be a little bit surface level. I think for you to sit there and say, some days you are going to feel like shit, is so important. It's so important for people to hear, and also to give yourself the permission that on those days when you feel terrible, to take a break. Anyone else in any other condition, when they're really suffering, there's no there's no guilt to taking a day off and recuperating and
Yeah,
recovering. What you're going through is very,
100%.
very difficult, and to give yourself the permission to feel bad. And yeah, I'm totally the
Yeah,
same, and it does feel very up and down. And there's days where it can feel totally within your stride. Um, but yeah, and when those dark days come, know that they will pass, and just kind of
yeah.
be kind to yourself, I guess.
If we're
Yeah.
being extremely open and honest, literally 2 weeks ago, I was like, nope, I need a day off. And I just had what we call like a mopey day.
Hmm.
And I just, watched a bunch of films, raided the kitchen, sat back on my bed, did nothing interesting, didn't leave the house. I probably looked a mess. Like, but then the next day, that Friday, I picked myself up and I went into uni for like 6 hours
Hmm.
because I feel like my mom especially, she's explained to me how there's a balance between, yes, you can mope, but to a point, and
Hmm.
you can have a day off, but not a week off. You just need one day and get out the door, like
Yeah.
however you're feeling the next day, because otherwise you're just giving into that depression and that rotting in you
Hmm.
that you want to do. So
Yeah,
yeah,
totally. It's a very difficult balancing act, and both sides aren't good. I feel like I particularly fell into the trap of, with my condition, everyone would just say, "Oh, it's just a rash or it's just an itch," and I kind of let that get into my head. And so if I was really suffering, I'd be like, "Well, no, I'm not stopping because it's just a rash. I just need to crack on and carry on." And that's wrong. Anyone else has any other major condition, like I said, if they need a day off, they'll have a day off, and that's not a problem. But as you say, some people then go the other way, and they can really lean into it. And you can certainly understand it.
yeah,
It's hard and it's difficult, and the idea of facing the world just feels impossible sometimes. But as you rightly
yeah.
say, it's just that tightrope.
You need to find that like balance for, I think, everyone as well. Something again I personally forget so much is that everyone's different. So whilst this works for me, which for me having one day off makes helps me, and I then know that I have to go into the world. I think other people may need that extra time or less time, like they may need just the morning or just the afternoon. Whilst personally, I need just one day and then I'll get back on my feet. And I think that for me personally, I'll see sometimes content creators or people on social media, and I'll be like, oh, but they just need this, and why do I need more or less? And I'll get into that trap of being like, well, they don't do that, and then I'm like, no, again, forget that. You're someone else. You're different. You're an individual.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally. Yeah, 100%. Speaking about the influencers, I feel like you've kind of become one to a degree, and your advocacy work is brilliant. It's so good. Your bio is I'm a photographer with a face under construction, which is just your sense of humour with all your
Yeah.
advocacy. Would you say that your advocacy work has kind of helped your situation, helped you feel more confident?
Yeah. I honestly, it's so funny because I started my Instagram for me in a way, and I didn't expect it to help anyone else. And I just was like, I'm like a random teenager trying to, deal with like grown up problems. And I was like, well, I'm just gonna rant to, my 5 followers and stuff like that. And then suddenly I got messages being like, oh, thanks so much for your help. And I was like, actually? Like, really? And it was quite funny because again, I just thought I was some random teenager, you know, moping around, didn't know who to talk to, so turned to Instagram and decided just to mope my life there and just try to. For me, it was very much. I had like, have you seen that interview with Zendaya where she's like, I have so many tabs open, I have to click
Yes.
delete. For
Yeah.
me, it was like I had so many tabs in my head and I needed to like cross them off individually, but I didn't know who, what, where, when to go. So I was like, Instagram seems like the place. And I got each tab by itself. And each tab was another post essentially that I got out of my brain and into another forum, which I didn't have to deal with yet. And then I'd get messages from people being like, oh, thanks so much for your help. And I was like, oh, I'm helpful, really? And yeah.
Please don't underestimate how helpful people like you are. It is just so vital to see that. It's something that I wish I had at school, was people to relate to, and even if it was just through Instagram, it just makes the world of difference to see other people like you and see what they're going through, and it changes absolutely everything. And people like you again have inspired me to do this. This is something that I always really wanted to hide away and downplay and not make a big part of my life, and it's been so incredibly liberating just stepping forward and saying, yep, this is me, this is who I am. And it's because of people like you being brave enough to put your face out there. And it's the fact that you're able to do it when you're so young. Like, I feel really daunted doing it, and I'm quite settled, really. I've got my wife, I've got my house. My life is fairly balanced. Whereas I feel like for younger people, you're right at the start of life. You're kind of in the trenches in terms of. I think it's a very difficult time. I think it's the most difficult time to be living with a visible difference, because aesthetics unfortunately become such a big deal when you're younger. And so for you guys to step forward and be brave enough to help people in that way, I just think is brilliant.
I get that, but I don't know. I just went for it. I think for me, one of my biggest inspirations was actually Nikki Lilly, because she's like a year older than me, I think. And I was like, if she can do it, why can't I be open about my problems? Because, like you said, I was very closed off, very this is my problem and I will deal with it. And it's quite a tiring thing to do, because at the end of the day, these things are a massive part of us. And it was quite hard to hide it. And it was just such a tiring thing to do. And I saw people like Nikki Lilly and Katie Piper, all of these people doing it. And I was like, if they can do it, why can't I? Like,
Mm-hmm.
I don't get it, if that makes sense. I was like, they can happily sit there talking about their problems. What's the difference? Like, I mean, there is a difference, but why can't I be open? Why am I saying that's so inspirational, but I can't do that? Like, it was very double standards of me, I felt. And I was like, I felt a bit like I'm cheating in a way. Like, it's such a double standards. Why am I not doing that if they if that makes sense.
Yeah, totally. I think you always underplay your own story a little bit, don't you? It's like when I started my
100%.
advocacy work and, the opportunities started to come in and more, charities and pharmaceutical companies, etc., wanted to work with me. It's like, well, I don't really understand what you want from me. But I think you don't realise your own story, I guess. And like your story, going through 100 surgeries is an incredible thing and an amazing story that you've been through. And so that, yeah, people definitely want to hear that for sure. Just to change the subject slightly, you did some work with Camp Simcha? Is that how you say it?
Simcha, yeah.
Okay, yeah. And you mentioned that it's quite an important resource. Do you mind explaining a little bit about what they do?
Yeah, so they're a charity. They work with kids who aren't well and have serious health problems. But I think the unique and really lovely thing about them is that as well as working with the child, they actually work with the family. So they help the family deal with having a child who's not well. Um, and they also will help the actual child, which I think is really lovely because they're seeing that it's not just the child, it's the whole family. So
Yeah, that's definitely something that gets left by the wayside a little bit, is the way that it can affect the whole family. My parents, bless them, trying to get me the care they needed. It was almost like a full-time job. And so
exactly. Yeah, no, 100%.
Mm.
It is a full time. I mean, it's like when I was like 6 and everything like really kicked off, it was practically most every like other or every few weeks I was having surgery. And my mom eventually was like, I just can't work and do this. So she had to give up work to support me. I mean, now she's gone back since I'm a lot older and more stable. But for a good few years then she was like, I can't do everything. Like I can't, run a house, deal with a chronically ill child and work. She was like, I can't do everything, which was really sweet that she actually, yeah, so it is a massively full-time job. And as well as that, I think something we forget is that I also had siblings and they need attention.
Mm-hmm.
They need TLC. I of course, when you're not well, get a lot of attention, So they're like, I also want attention. And that's that balance of my parents having to give them attention and me attention and it's quite a balancing act, if that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it definitely does. Yeah, it's just, as you say, it's impossible for a parent to be able to look after a very sick child and then just go about life as normal. And that's something that, yeah, people don't recognize sometimes. And yeah, as you say, the siblings often don't get the fuss and the attention they need. And I feel like in terms of helping the parents, sometimes all it takes is just for someone to sit down and have a chat with them and just someone that understands and just say, you're doing amazing, you're doing a great job, you're a great parent, keep going. People just want to hear that sometimes, don't they?
So true. I mean, no, that's so true. They sometimes, so you get assigned like a family liaison officer when you are a part of the charity, and um, my one, she's amazing, and she literally would come sometimes just to have like a coffee with my mom because I think we forget that our parents are going through it as well. Like, yes, I'm the one that has like all the problems, but my mom especially, she was in every appointment, like especially when again I was 6, like I was young, like I was a proper baby at the time, like I can't just be like, okay, I'm gonna go to my appointment now. Like my mom had to go with me, and she has to sign the consent forms, she has to make the decisions, and it takes a toll on them. Like there were times where like my mom would be like, I actually need to like call my dad and be like, I don't know what to do. Like what do we do? If that makes sense. Like because you're having such hard questions put at you that adults can't understand. Like adults find hard, and it's quite daunting for them. And I think that we forget sometimes that they're going through it as much as we are, just in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And they have to see their child suffering as well, which just must be
Yeah,
emotionally draining and mentally exhausting.
exactly.
And the pressure and responsibility to make sure you're doing the right thing all the time. And, you've got to obviously lean on the experts, but while sort of doing your own research and making sure everything checks out. And Yeah, I do. I think almost everyone I talk to from the visible difference community, they have an incredible support network. And it's almost like when a child is born with a visible difference, they're always born to amazing parents. And I'm sure that's not always the case. And for people out there who don't have that support network, must be some of the strongest people you could imagine to be able to take that on, to take the world on your own. And hopefully those people know to reach out to resources such as Changing Faces and other charities. And I'm sure, so for me, and I'm sure Abigail's the same, we're always available if we can help in any way. So please reach out.
100%. Like, no, 100%.
You're a very talented photographer, as we were talking about earlier. I was walking around your gallery, like, wow, that is. I really like the. I'm sorry, I'm not much of an artist or anything. I'm not creative, but I really love the image of it was at night with sort of the neon signage. If you remember that one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was the analog one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, do you do some of the where you print it yourself, like do it all manually? Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's cool.
I'd never done it before, and then I come to uni, and our first task was to start on analog photography, so like proper film, like like the actual rolls of film. Like it was really interesting. Like I learned how to develop black and white negatives, and you do the putting it in the
Oh,
different.
cool.
Yeah, it was such an interest. Like honestly, I was fascinated because I'd done photography, but the more digital. And suddenly I was given basically like this analog camera. I was like, okay, now what? I had to like learn or like how to redo it, which actually that neon sign, it was quite funny because when you have a digital camera, sometimes the settings will change automatically for night, but with analog, you have to do it manually. And it was like, it was my second week with analog, and I, of course, still learning and forgot completely about that. And I shot a whole roll of film at night. And that was one of the only pictures that came out because everything was just dark. Because, again, I forgot that you have to manually change the settings. And I came into uni with my like negatives, and I was like, kind of awkward story. And my teacher was like, oh my God, this is painful. It was really, because like it was just so awkward because she was like, okay, because they know how to do this really well. They don't forget stupid things like that. And I'm just like, say funny story. And she's just like, oh, lovely. And it was really funny.
Honestly, they're amazing, those people that can shoot analog. I've got a camera, I don't know what I'm doing with it, and it's the most, it's like I've got like a supercomputer in it, the amount of settings it's got. And so to be able to do it analog is just amazing. And I feel like people are starting to kind of appreciate that world more. Now we kind of move
100%.
more into AI and all sorts of craziness. People are like, everyone's buying turntables and analog cameras and going back the opposite way.
Yeah, no, 100%. Like I found it fascinating. Like I optionally sometimes shoot like analog now. I did a photo shoot with some friends in an abandoned barn on analog because it's more fun. Like I mean, there's a side of it that's really fun because you get to put you wrap the native back up and then you give it to the Artful Dodgers or Rapidae, and they develop it for you, and it's like, oh, this is fun. Like, what am I going to get on these sheets on negative?
Yeah,
like,
that's cool.
Fun.
Have you met Dylan yet at Changing Faces?
We've met virtually, yeah.
Okay, yeah, he's a big photographer as well, yeah.
Yeah, he's so good though. He's amazing.
He was saying that he finds it quite therapeutic. Do you find it therapeutic as well? Is it kind of almost a little bit of escapism, I guess?
I find most of my art is usually escapism.
Okay.
I my most photography is quite an escapism for me, but my most escapism is probably painting, actually.
Okay.
I think for me that was my first. It was my first channel into the art world. That was my first like hole that we dug into the art world for me, and I think it's like my roots now. So whenever like I'm stressed or something, I'm like, I'm gonna go paint now.
Nice.
But yeah, it's all escapism.
No, that's lovely to be able to have that. So are you one of these creative people that's just kind of good at everything creatively?
I mean, I don't think so, but I mean, like, not everything, but some things I'm not too bad at,
No, that's lovely to be able to have that.
like painting and stuff.
I'm just no good at it, unfortunately, annoyingly. Like I have family members who are brilliant. My granddad, you know, when you watch someone draw and it's almost it's hard to explain. It's like they're fluent with the pencil, if that makes sense. It's just so
Oh,
easy. The way they just whip something up without thinking about it.
oh, yeah.
And I've got a few family members like that, but not me, unfortunately. And yeah, my wife is she is very talented, loves anything
Oh,
creative, anything she can get her hands dirty, you know, whether it's,
oh
so
yeah.
she's a glass worker. So she melts
Cool.
down rods of glass and makes them into glass
That's so
flowers.
cool. That
She's
is
actually got
really
a show in New York in a couple of months, which is kind of crazy. Yeah.
wow. Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Yeah,
I don't know if you've ever
I love
seen
that.
Blown Away on Netflix. It's like the glass blowing show. No, they're
No, I
competing to win a
haven't.
place at the Corning Museum of Glass in New York, and that's where Donna's
Oh,
doing her show in May.
oh, well, good luck. I hope it
Yeah,
goes
thank you.
well.
I
That's
think she's
so
a
fun.
bit daunted, bless her. It's like there's like an amphitheater with like I think it's like a 500-seater amphitheater, and she's got to walk out and do like a demo.
Um, it, I'm sure it will go all
I'm
right.
sure it will. Yeah,
It's probably,
she's
I
very
feel
good.
like yeah, I find these things are more daunting, like the run up, but once you're like there, it's not bad at all.
Yeah, I think when you're in the moment, I think she'll be able to enjoy it for sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Yeah. For anyone living with a visible difference, or maybe a condition similar to yours, I don't suppose you have any sort of any practical advice for how to make things a little bit easier. So, for example, one of mine is unfortunately my condition. It kind of it shows as redness quite a lot of times, kind of extreme redness on my face, which I'm very conscious of. And I've got, tell you what, I've got it right here. I'm not sponsored by this or anything like that, but I bought this the other day. It's by a company called Altruist, it was created by a dermatologist. It's a non-profit. They donate a lot to um, parts of the third world, I believe. This has got anti-redness in it, and so for anyone like me, if your symptoms show as redness, this is sun cream. It's moisturising. It's also got anti-redness, and it's absolutely brilliant. It gives me a little bit of control. That if I wake up and I'm having a particularly bad flare, I just pop that on it, and it lessens my symptoms by about 80%. So yeah, that would be
Oh,
my practical
amazing.
advice.
Yeah. I mean, my most practical, I feel like it's probably not practical, but I just take it day by day. I mean, for me, with my condition, it's very much every day so different that I had to learn to take it day by day and be honest with yourself in that way. But I don't think that's practical. I think it's just advice.
Yeah, yeah, no, that's good advice. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, are you comfortable sharing where people can find you online?
Yes. So my main channel is Brave Artist 2005, which is Instagram. I do have TikTok, which I'm trying to be more active on, but I sometimes forget it's there. But Instagram is my main portal that I use. So yeah, that's where you can find me.
Yeah, definitely go and give Abigail a follow because her content is brilliant. It's really interesting, and you can have a look at her photography while you're there as well. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thank
Honestly,
you.
you don't realise how inspiring you are, and the fact that you can sit there and be so smiley and happy and friendly after what you've had to go through is incredible. So thank you so much for sharing your story, and thank you for your time.
No, thank you for allowing me to be on the podcast. It's such an honor.
No worries at all.
I've been really excited about this. So thank you.
No worries. I'll see you on the 20th.
Definitely, I'm very excited.